Hi, Grandpa. Can you tell us a little bit about your and your great grandfather's land claim?
Well, my grandfather's, I better introduce myself first. My first name is Fred Nanibush, no middle name, just surname Nanibush, Nanibush. And this is what my family had used right from the beginning of the time when I can remember as a young child. And my father, Jonas Nanibush, had mentioned lots of times the land that we lived on was ours because it was paid for by my great-great-grandfather Esquenabi, who went to American Revolution like a war against America. So how long did my grandfather was in the battle? How long did he remain in the area at the border down in Niagara, someplace there? And after a year or two, which side by side with the Great Britain, and the time came, the revolution was settled down. The American finally signed the agreement, there'll be no more. So I guess the officer of that British Army had asked my great-great-grandfather Esquenabe, who was Ottawa Indian, and so the British sergeant or general said, "We will give you copies of that agreement for the land that you request at Perry Island, that you will find the papers in the archives when you need them, which we don't have right now." So my great-grandfather answered, "It is my grandson, his name is Nanibush, that I want his name on that land for the land in Perry Island, Georgian Bay." So the time came after the revolution, and he came to live along southwestern part of Ontario into a place called Tiny Township, which is Tiny Township now. Eh? And his family, whatever he had, and whatever the belongings he had carried with him, all the gifts and cattle and horses, what was needed to keep up the family support. And that's where he farmed in Tiny Township, which is now eastern part of Wasaga Beach, Ontario. So that time, he had his family, which moved northward and some came to Perry Island to live here, but other relatives that were uncles or cousins with Esquanabi was lost in a battle. But any other information with family history is that our family had extended out most of Lake Ontario right to Niagara, and Peterborough, St. Lawrence, where our carvings in that was located somewhere around Peterborough district. And so is the information from about the history that we once had all Lake Ontario, where the treaty was signed, Treaty 3, that we covered Lake Ontario, especially Toronto grounds today. And that information is all in the history books about Lake Ontario, which is located in Toronto, Ontario. So further reading has to take place to be able to get the full information to read up on further history, just exactly how far, when did my family have been residing in Ontario. So now the records show that the land always belonged to us, according to my father, Jonas Nanibush, and my uncle Alec Nanibush, saying that the land belongs to us. Anybody that's Nanibush is a resident, have title to the land. So as the years went by, all the elders had passed away. That was, estimate number was about 78 in the family, and relatives locating on Menominee Bay, shores of Menominee Bay, facing eastward of that shoreline. And so we've been having difficult times by the reservation officers, the chief and council want to use our land and come forward to be members. And my family did not want to accept until the time came after Second World War, 1946. So
let me get this straight, Grandpa. Anishinaabe was there before the Indian Act and before the Canadian government was formed. The land grant was given to him at that time.
yes, yeah. And the Indian Affairs never got to the information to address this land to this island. But reference from my grandfather, there was boundaries were set on this island to recognize this is a Nanibush settlement where Nanibush is living. And we never got to hold the survey registration from the township of Perry Sound. It's a hidden factor from where that even Indian Affairs did not have no recognition on that, even though my grandfather went to ask the Indian Affairs that was set up in Perry Sound District at those times in somewhere around 1856 or 1857, somewhere there, that he approached the Indian Affairs, said that he wants recognition of his land, his settlement, that he had reason to be given that land that he asked for because he was supporting what he was saying. And the officer or secretary of Indian Affairs made a document for that land request, but never issued it as the ownership of this Indian land or provincial land, native land, or there's nothing written. But the land is supposed to be ours, that was paid for is what we own, what land that belongs to the family name. And what answers can we get? Read some more?
Right.
Yes.
Right. So
let's have the Treaty 3 that was still mentioned some time ago being used in Manitoba. border somewhere there. How can we bring out a solution where that land's claim could be used to guarantee to regain back our from having our own land, family land that belongs to us and had been paid for by the Great Britain. So all that, whatever the land is worth, why should the government let the First Nation come and claim our settlement property? It's a settlement that everything, even Stephen, with the natives' help, with the government in the time of the revolution, there should be understood there, because the government wants to take back what he paid for with honor. What kind of government is that who takes back and give the authority to somebody else to take it from the ones that standing on the land that's supposed to be their own?
So are you describing the history of Perry Sound when a reservation was established there, and then
this is the one,
and was moved over to Perry Island?
That's where the chief they call in the time of the first reservation was made on this island. Megas was the name. He was a leader, so he had been recognized to be the chief for trying to have the control by using just sign language. He couldn't talk English, but yet he was chosen to be the chief for the small group that organized themselves as the members on the Indian Reserve. There was nobody in the time in the records where that would be mentioned that there was people here under borderline. They have land there to this reservation. There was nothing written to the council meetings that could be found today that the added lands could be added to the Indian Reserve. No. It was later understood that whatever the amount of the inside the boundaries of Perry Island Indian Reserve could not be enlarged and added to the reserve, like the connected islands to the reserve could be claimed. No. It's a one subdivision only for the Indian Reserve. Other lands cannot be added to that. So how come today the First Nation are allowed by the government to use the reference that they need it. The First Nation needs that, and they're claiming under Ojibwe, and positively, do they know where Dawa people, well, there's other nation are Ojibwe.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 3 nations of Indians here. And we're Dawa. So in their division of recognition how to look after and maintain the reserve, whatever they need, we never signed any document or agreement with the controllers, the chief and council, the Indian Affairs, that we signed a surrender or to use our land to the chief and council to generate the treaty for more presence to enlarge the villages into one and get better treatment, live better for all the nations that here. But no, they never, they just insinuate that there's nobody here. To say there's a family of Nanibush that's entitled to land, that they were given the approval to control this portion of land by the government, and that we got no say, we're left out under an ambush. That what can we answer to their claim to use this land and get monies under control and more of it, and not even to share any of it to help us out. So where we live today, we don't own nothing. The chief came by a couple of summers ago. He said, he asked, how much land do you have here? All the surroundings you can see in the stretch of the bay, I said, and about a half mile in or 1 mile in towards the boundaries of Perry Island. So his answers were, no, all you're going to have here for a year, if in case you die, your family is going to inherit only maybe 400, 500 square feet of land that they can fight for.
Huh. Okay.
So later on, I went to ask in the office what size of a land that was given to me under my name for my land, for my family to inherit. Nobody knows. Why didn't the chief leave this information in the files of their office?
Right. So let's go back to the land grant to your great-great-grandfather Eshkanabe. How big was the land tract approximately in acreage?
Well, they said about 1,500 acres.
1,500 acres.
Yeah.
Was there not some gold coins granted also to your great grandfather?
That was after the revolution.
Right.
Uh,
But they were found. They were left behind in Tiny Township, were they not?
yes, because either that Esquanabe died before, but his wife, Gokmisnan, Chegokmisnan was her, they called her. She was pointing against a hill in the property where they lived. And she died like that, pointing to everybody that come to visit her and talking. But she couldn't talk back to answer.
Mhm.
And so after that, there was no more information where next we knew that our family of Nanibush went all over Georgian Bay, and they came, some of them came here to this land which was given to them by the first government of Canada, which was Great Britain.
Right.
And under all that in maybe a search, how that those coins were buried somewhere in the ground on that property in a baking powder tin. 7 or 9 of that gold coins was never spent anywhere. Just carried like that from the time they traveled and forgotten in time where they couldn't be spent nowhere. They were too much in value for general stores to accept. So, and then it was thought about here by the family about those gold coins. We knew where it was, the location, but not in a direct spot to go and find them because of the properties that's there, or go and ask the township for the information where was them gold pieces found back in what year in the early in the late 1800s or 1850, all the way down to hundreds.
Right. So they were found. Were they put in a museum, were they?
That's what it's been said. It was put in a museum for display, and where's the story to go with it?
Right.
Who was it? Who did it belong to? Who donated to the township, or who donated for payment for something else? There was no information on that. But in search to mention it was in a township pointing to the farm area against the hill. Who knows for sure what location, because when that became a township, then those people that owned and bought the properties, anybody that was there before was being ordered out, any native, because like the way they did with most of the natives, they lived in Algonquin Park. They were moved to here, Perry Island, Indian Reserve, that there was no say to only to accept to go to the Indian reservation by those King family and others that resided with them in Algonquin Park area, somewhere there.
So those gold coins, along with farm animals, maybe some equipment, and of course the land itself. The land itself was a gift from the crown that was to last forever.
Yes, the duplicates that my grandfather carried was later claimed by the people who have the holding the information about the history and about people, new immigrants to the country, especially in Lake Ontario and Lake St. Clair and Georgian Bay. All those people had that they received all their presents from or awards after the revolution. So in order to guarantee anything that I have seen the medals that they got after the revolution. It's just a silver coin, not more than about inch and a half to 2 inches across the circle with the hole through it so they can put a string through there to wear it around their neck to carry, eh?
Mm-hmm.
And where did that go? But that's the proof that what they did in the time of revolution there's no further explanation about what happened for my family in the beginning of Nanibush family coming to back up to Perry Island. They were all over Ontario, the extended family of Nanibush. you may find some that are relatives in Wapur Island, so they claim. So now that they heard of Perry Island, we have land here, but there's no recognition. The proof that we have and how much there is, how much honor there is to keep this land is British, English, into the empire and the government set up in Ontario to change these laws as the civilization becomes more into greater words to defend themselves on land claims, land ownership, anything like that. So when our chief over here, to be able to listen to him was not my way of hearing right, because when he mentioned those land codes, where do you find land code in the treaty? We should have been told that read the book of those rights the time of when we write our name in the treaty list, that we wouldn't write the treaty to surrender our land or have it taken away from us. Is the government give full power to be able to destroy our land that was given to us as fairly as honest and honesty involved there. If the government wants to work like that, but far as their claim to the north, why rob those people of their land, Alaska, the Arctic, and them claiming all the animals that are for survival pattern for us natives, not for them to wipe out, but for us to keep around us, so in order to depend on them for our survival and be able to hunt and fish all our lives. But and then they destroy all the animal grounds in the forest for parks where you can't go in to hunt, can't go and hunt in the backyards. We don't know whether we can go and hunt in railroad property. You can't even walk on the railroad property where there's nobody there to trespass, but we can be charged for trespassing. So over here now, all our native laws to come with membership being under treaty, we're full status, but yet we can't continue on to survive with that
Right.
without nothing to defend us against the party of the chief and council and their new laws that they use under the corporation, because they incorporated and put all the claims into one of the three sections of the three nationality of natives on Perry Island for them to control, and better government would appear that the native leaders are recognized to be self-government, not these people. Their family names are Tibavanum. And as long as we're Nanibush, no, that's not acceptable. They won't even listen to put our land request, any kind of request about the treaty to their meeting. We don't get nothing. Look at this house. Bad plumbing, water's bad, the water has metal in it, it's polluted. It needs to be cleaned up, which it takes my money to correct the problem. I got to use my pension. I don't have enough pension to pay for all that.
Right. So what you're saying is that you've had little but no support at all, and that you're in fact surrounded by people interested not in your land claim, but in your land.
They're interested in our family settlement land, all the shoreline, from here down to 2.5 miles that they wanted. So the band control chief and council changed all the laws through their corporation to cut down our lands. I don't even have property that extends down to the landing at my shoreline. And my uncle's property are registered in the Indian Affairs that they put houses on there. And they set up a store and business here at the swing bridge on Perry Island, Waswaxing lands, or whatever you call it, because it's under their control, under corporation. There's no Indian laws that are to depend on to defend me about my request that to keep my family land for my family that extends to fill all of this, every acre what there is here in the family land of Nanibush, given by the first government of Canada, that we no longer have or nothing to say anything about it. So what we're going to do, we have to ask some distant support, better mind in law who understand this, to defend us, to support us in this claim, because we stand out to be the family that should be thankful and honored that we did our share in the first name of what's in the history about America and Canada. If we didn't help to keep Canada to be Ontario and all the other northern provinces, we would have to be living all in America if the American would have won the battle in the time of that revolution. So we made our sacrifice to help the British win that much, at least to set up the borderline between here and St. Lawrence, right out to the Arctic. So where can we be recognized to keep our land that was honestly given in a thankful way by the new rulers of this country that came to invade it? What are we going to do? Is a good side of their law going to save our land? It's like a medal of honors wearing on your jacket when you appear in the public, because you come from the land that was greatly appreciated by the first government of Canada, which is Britain. If there was honesty involved, to be thankful, then we should be spoken for to keep this land. We not only want, I would recommend, to speak for my family, to say we want to keep our land, not to accept anything else, like just to give us something like compensation. No. If they want to give us compensation, $200 million times 200. That would be the right amount. Or we don't care to live continuously in shame for losing the greatest honor that we walked on and carried. How are we going to act? And walk with our hands up in the air, can't say anything, can't use our hands to service ourselves around these grounds because of the regulation that's newly being used here against us. We don't have nothing. We can't say nothing.
Yeah.
somebody has to advise me. Either that, leave this shameful district, dishonesty involved, no recognition of any honest management for what we once had. We don't have nothing. So we must know in time from the government to transform this to the First Nation advice from the government to leave us alone. Don't bother with our gift that we got from the first government of Canada that we want to keep. It's not a rich land. It's not full of minerals, diamonds or gold or any kind of minerals like that. If not mica, that's what's all that's located. So the land that we once had while it was still under our name, they came to dig up these farms for their use to set up their road to their subdivision they had made to make money for their office under that corporation and give us no share in digging up these farmlands. How are we going to have the law defend our behalf under these claims where we've been left out from the beginning when the new immigrants arrived here on the Indian Island, Indian Reserve, Indian Territory from Algonquin Park. They too, looking at lands claim, while they're inside of our land that was already paid for. It was paid for my family and extended families to live in the rest of our lives, long as our name existed to carry on the ownership of this property, because we did not accept treaty in the first place. We were non-status from my childhood until I was about 12 years old, when our father went in to meet with the Indian Affairs superintendent that was taking in applicants for papers to be signed by new members for the reserve. There was no story to tell us what we're going to lose, what would we be allowed. They didn't tell us that we were going to fall into the hands of destruction. Now we can't go in to do what we want. They come and rent our shorelines for other holidays, non-members, long as people can pay for their renting the shorelines operated by the chief and council. What we can't say anything to complain. We can't chase the people who is trespassing. We should be able to announce to the chief and council that they were trespassing, because whoever they brought in was trespassing, them too were trespassing. So they say when the chief came here, who do I turn to recognize me where I have at least a little bit of chance to save some land for my family that was given? If it wasn't given, why does the government allow all that to happen? Let's have some showcase on that. Bring our word to where people will hear, to understand where we're being neglected.
Yeah. And it is, Grandpa, it is the most interesting part of Canadian history.
Hey?
It is the most interesting part of Canadian history. This story of Nanibush and his grandfather Eshkonabe.
Yeah.
We're getting close to an hour's worth of recording.
Yeah?
I would like to thank you for sharing your story and ask you if you have any last words or comments. Feel free.
My comments on that, what the story I told was that there have to be people that understand to what I'm saying, the story I had told, that our name is in the history. It's in the history where Canada have to understand. There should be more books on that, sections of that book that tells a story. If we're losing this land and how we lost it, if we regained it, well, let's have an honest story. Who's going to tell right on behalf of the end of that story? It cannot come to an end. It goes on and on and on. And you will find the answers in the archives, where we are not the only people of this country, but let's be heard. If we're to lose this country, we didn't surrender. We didn't surrender. Not to the First Nation. If we surrendered through the time when my father signed the treaty, that's not acceptable by us. My family would never surrender to give up their country. A treaty to be given something what they lost, it would be such a great value in that loss that they have to live by and suffer the great pain in mind for what happened. If I have greater power in mind, I wish to express this in the time of being asked if I could tell the same story 1,000,000 times. I would live more extendable years to tell the story if someone doesn't come up to write a book about what I have to say.
Yeah.
Eh?
I wholeheartedly agree. Again, I'd like to thank you for your time and your strength and courage in sharing and keeping the story of Nanibush and Ashkenazi. I have one last question. Who was in charge of Britain at that time with Ashkenazi?
Well, Ashkenazi only had one name, and his brothers that was in the Niagara, the island before the Niagara Falls, and we might have known that part of the family in the time of the 1700s into the 1800s. We don't have the names. If they had a name of every member of the family in Niagara, they only have one name who lived on that island on the shores of Niagara. So my family, my dad, when we get out to work or to go out on a boat, on a paddle or a canoe, walking to go and pick cranberries or looking for special kind of timber to use for carving, to make axe handles and paddles and oars and pike poles for ships to use, docking, their big boats, they used the pike poles. So that work, what he had to look after his family, before that, he was working in the sawmills and cutting timber with the saw for lumber companies. In the time of getting employment.
Mm-hmm.
So during the heavy winter months, they all had to walk through deep snow with snowshoes and on the way to travel. And my father was told by his father when they first arrived here, they had to break up all the beaver dams to kill all the beaver and live off them for eating meat and use their fur for their cushions and blankets where there were beaver pelts sewn together for their winter cover and windbreak and no other people was here except the Nanibush family and other people that the men that married was from Owen Sound way across the lake and bring them home, and this is where the family was raised, and some left. My distant aunts, they left to go other reservations, and the family got smaller. And my dad and I used to travel, and he used to advise me, your two brothers, they should be married now and have families, so we have land here to live on and raise a happy family. But you, he says, you have to do that because you're the youngest and you should get married and have a lot of children. Do what you can, he says, and long as you're here, nobody's not going to chase you off because this is your land. He said, I will make a paper, I will keep it someplace, safe place. I never found it yet. But his documentation on from Indian Affairs, it says there's no inheritance. But according to him, my father, Jonas Nanibush, that it's given through the family, the inheritance, not by paperwork.
Right.
No. So that way, he says, nobody else will interfere. So now those First Nation people, and their talk carries through the neighborhood. They say, Fred Nanibush, he's got paper there. Their father has no inheritance. But we have. We have because we have this paper. This paper says this land is ours. If the government will recognize it in the court of law in all Canada.
So that's why we're asking for support. Not only do we need support, we need time and money to research the archives.
Yeah.
In order to solidify evidence of the land clan.
They will find it. The lawyer, secretary, or their colleagues who they may find to searching for the information in the archives, they'll find it. So they want a fresh copy of that before they open up the case. So there's other books in there that tells that story. That my Esquenabe's father that signed the Treaty 3 with the British. If there's such a documentation, it must be in the archive.
Right.
Yeah, because it said, recording said we own Lake Ontario. Or landholders, or what's a better story? What's a better story? You know, just going that little bit of time in the archives in Toronto, you get this information. So if somebody come with me, 3 or 4 other people, they're going to look into the files for more books. Because one book will tell you forward information to the next one. It's just like, let's say, what do you call those people? The Empire. The British Empire, Empire of Canada, all them people who are members to introduce the trades that they carry, that they represent to make airplanes, to make to bring the parts of trains that gonna run from one end of the country out to the Arctic, or go all around the country of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that came from Canada and was mentioned by the Empire.
Who was in charge of the British Empire at the time of the American Revolution?
British were just starting to bring the...
Was it a king?
Mackenzie King?
No, was it King George? Mackenzie?
King, no, I think it's Queen Victoria.
It was Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have some noting on that. Where my great-grandmother, or just my grandmother, had talked with such person like Queen Victoria, but in a native language. It's written in a native language. I got it someplace.
Wow.
Yeah. But to understand what it means, you need more, because you know where I got that from. I got it from the microfilm from the Indian Affairs that I sent for through the Library of Pear Sound to Indian Affairs Library for that microfilm. Mm-hmm. And there was few of them that I ordered through the library, and I look at them through the screen. And while doing that, I can get copies with the pages in South to a record and get a copy of what I'm reading. That's where that information came from.
Mhm.
That about Six Nations and how they get to keep their land
Mhm.
and be protected from the public about the nation, who they are, and that more Canadian being Canadian because of under the British what do you call it? Under the British rule about they have more to be understood than citizenship
Right.
to be from this country. Eh?
Mhm.
So there's that story that I never got at all. It's still in the archives at Indian Affairs. And to remember what you call that Farquhar film. But that's how come I got this information.
Yeah.
Yeah. And reading some of it through, I never recorded anything to get copies. To make copies, to record more notes for somebody to carry, but I don't have nobody. It's just me and my wife, Dolores. I went to the library and read up on the microfilm, bring home the copies, and so she would ask me what information I got. That's a lot better than what those people know that's sitting in council down the village, she said. Well, I says, you have to do something because in remembering about your father or someone else to tell you some story about certain rules or what to honor, what laws that you're to believe. And so to remember those things, what I say, then if there was more people to speak for me or to reach the knowledge that are carrying a law there that should be awarded this claim to be well understood that we belong to this land as much as it belongs to us.
Well said, Grandpa.
Eh?
Well said.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, we have a great hope that there's more to come about the Nanibush Nung. And we're reaching out for support at this time
Yeah.
for anyone who might sympathize and empathize with your story, which coincides with the history of Canada. Again, I'd like to thank you personally for sharing today.
Well,
Miigwech.
I'm glad that you can listen to my thoughts, what I know from what I carry, and sometimes what I know, it wants to come out and talk about it to people who wants to hear me,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell it as honest as possible. All the reference that I put together is well tells the right story and to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
Eh?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. And my brother, Frank, he's my favorite brother. He's very protective. And the time when we went out working together, he was always beside me, and he defended me every way he could. And to be able to advise me something better, he'd tell me right away. If I say some words that's not needed, well, he says, you just be quiet for now. You don't know what you're saying. I'm here to protect you and just listen to what I have to do for you, he said. So the only time that we listened to one another, two people, two brothers in a hospital, that to talk about Levi, the older brother that went to war in the Second World War, he made no comments on what there is about the family history and with his problem, whatever the home that they had was gone. Then this house was asked for by my second brother, and that's how come I'm here now, because the other house was that's my house over there, that little hillbilly shack, eh? And Levi, my oldest brother, his ownership in his voice was that house was only his, not a joint ownership for the two brothers. Eh? No, he donated to the girlfriend, and at the time of his death, they come and took the house away, moved it across the road. So Frank said, it's a good job I asked for this house, because where am I going to live? I wouldn't want to live over there where they moved the house to, where it's part of my house, he said.
Right.
Okay. So my brother didn't say I could have this house before his death. But my claim there was done through my lawyer, who looked after my brother's account from his pension to the payments for the hospital. The hospital took some money for his stay in there because even though he was sick, you think he would only have to be paid by the Indian Affairs hospitalization, but no, they took part of his pension, and the other account remained right in the hospital. So when he died, my lawyer claimed that for the whatever he told the management for that was that there was a sister and brother of that Frank Nanibush. Well, his account is gone to his office, and the monies there had been divided to two people. That's me and my sister. So, and there was no land mentioned. So, because of that, that party of the chief and council already took this land survey and moved it over into their office to control. What you call that fair management by that chief and council? To even say, we'll pay you money, we'll give you shares, whatever your land comes into our management, we'll give you percentage of that interest. No, they did not say that. They did not do that. My brother didn't sign no papers. My other brother, Levi, he didn't sign. If the land was mentioned in that will that he left for the girlfriend, they would have had to move the house back over here where they got it from in order to get the full inheritance, the lot and the house. But only the house went. So the document of that deed there's no more, nothing being said about it. No.
Well, that brings us up to today.
Yeah, well.
Up to date.
There's so much of that, I got to say something because I got nobody to talk to other times, other people. And when I talk to you, I know you understand me. And more to say in favors, you're doing it all because there's nobody else that could have done any better to bring that donation account for to pay for the claim, the land's claim.
Legal fees.
Legal fee, yeah. it's not transfer, but it's the word of the law that has to be used to get your belongings back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, excuse me for not changing the subject every time we see each other, but you know, you're a family, and you understand what I'm trying to explain. And when you came up with these ideas and finding the answers where there would be help provided, and soon we'll get to the lawyer that's going to accept the challenge. And when the law reads our story, they're going to be fully amazed because this generation of Nanibush came a long way to meet Britain into the law where it changed hands from British to Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
Eh?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, if it was in a part of the French laws that are being used in Quebec, well, there too, it may be claimed through the Quebec into Ontario to the border of the America. So the law translates a lot of different ways throughout the country.
Mm-hmm.
And if the laws are recognized, that nobody ever mentioned over here about the Treaty 3. I was talking to a lady down the track road another time a few years ago. She's not a friend anymore. I used to go and talk with her trying to get in her pants. Eh? She's single, living, she got a son and daughter, and she lives alone. And I figure I could get around to talking to her, and I'm single. I got no wife, and no, she refused every time. So I said, with these leadership is very confusing about erasing our duration about membership. How much can we belong if we belong to the treaty or this land where the treaty is? I said, I may not belong anywhere because even though these people that are chief in council today to say what should be going, you can't say anything against them because they're not going to honor it, they're not going to believe it. I said, what do you think? Well, I said, when my family in the history before came here, there was no other people. there was beaver ponds, all bushland, all timber, no roads, just the high hills you had to find to get around the far side of the beaver ponds and things like that to get around this island. So my people and pick the places where they're going to have their gardens and kill these animals to get more land to where to plant after they drain the beaver pond. And so they kill all the beavers and break down their barricades and use some of the sticks for wood and fencing and start making the trails and roads where to walk through for our family. Oh, Fred, what you tell me, you should tell the chief about that because that's what he needs. No, I said, I'm not going to tell him piss all. I said, why, they were not here before. I said, before us. We were here before all you people. So why should you carry the story? And we're following behind. Yeah, that's what my dad said. What his father told him. That's what they had to do. Drain all those roads that are here was not here. There was this trail.
Wow.
Today you see those trails over here. That's our wagon roads.
Wow.
No, not treaty people. No, not them. After the rest of the people of Ontario, more in the other side of Algonquin Park, eastern Ontario, Indians came. They're coming to this reservation. Eh? And they were, after settling down here for one generation, there's no documentation to tell the story where they came from, where they were born, where their grandfather was born, nothing like that to carry. So then now the kings over there that are in charge now, that are Tibavadung and King, they say our grandfather, we should be able to have the inherent right where our grandfather had resided here and have our choice of where to live through the times with the Indian Affairs Law, where each family is allowed, 3 to 4 acres. So if a family has a son, he marries, and then down a few years, he's got 2 children, and then already he's gaining more land there unless these children get married and proper age, then they get to have their land to go to. That's how that treaty is supposed to work. But no, they didn't manage it like that. They managed to grab our land, which already was cleared, and roads, trails was already here, and the shorelines had been all cleared, and where they're supposed to go, southwestern of the island, is all bushland. Why don't they go over there, clear the shoreline for their beaches, and say that there's a land claim for them there? But no, they want something already done, like what they're doing here, eh? So in the place where my cousins had their docking shoreline, these people, they wanted to use it for cottage country landing. So, to talk about those kind of neighbors here across reserve, I can't see why they do not use the land. They leased it for cottagers. Okay, so they don't live there. That's the land where they're supposed to live. Instead of living there, they leased it. They leased it, and the cottagers want a better road. The corporation, which is Tababdung, put the road in there for the cottagers, where the road was not included in the time of leasing the cottage territory. There's lots of things. There's lots of things in my mind that was done up till today. You cannot go and cut any timber close to where the lots are, cottage leasing. There's a shoreline on one hand side, on the left hand side there's extended lot there, which is a bushland you cannot cut. But it's still Indian territory, but it is now under surrendered.
So what you're saying is we're not part of the Huron treaties. Was it the Bronson, is it?
Yeah. It's those people, they have the family name Tababinum.
Mm-hmm.
They're the people that they talk with the government officials under the Indian Affairs that they signed the treaty. The surname, initials and their surname, Tababinum, not other family names included that.
Right.
Co-signers under the main signature. So that's where that was used to operate under neglect because they saw us, but they won't do nothing for us. We're here all right, but they're not going to give us nothing. Only as little as possible, only to show that they give. Eh? No, this is, you know what, this is the honest truth. This is what's been happening. My three Nanibush matured men, they were old age people. Alec Nanibush, my uncle, my dad, and Henry Nanibush. They signed a treaty. They're supposed to get a house. They're supposed to get a team of horses, few heads of cattle, sheep and goats and chickens and turkeys, whatever. They never got the house. They got food rations a couple of other times, how many times, but they didn't get to build them a home. Yeah, they were built. I mean, there were monies given by the Indian Affairs, but the house was never built. Now, where did this money go for that building? And the other uncle, he got the land situated beside the road. When he died, it all went to his wife. And his wife, legitimate children, not his children, but his wife had children after he passed on. And that land went to them children that's not cousin to the Nanibush. Now they're fighting over that. The different adopted children's adopted names, it was surnames that was given to them. Mm-hmm. It's signed under that to the Indian Affairs, where there's no explanation to me about it. It's none of my business. It doesn't involve me. But to say, what kind of deal is that anyway? Mm-hmm. To be able to mandate something like that, a property, you would do it as fair as possible as you can. But not at this point, this with these people I know. There could be false signatures. You know, to go ahead and take the chances if there was an investigation, fall into that, find out the reality of who is in right. But they're all to blame. Nobody's telling the right answer, they're all lying. and they believed their own laws that they made up. What do you think of that?
Well, Grandpa, I'm going to have to stay out of that one.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say my time has come to an end. I never will ever support that First Nation on Waswauxing, they call it. But this is not Waswauxing. This is Nanibush settlement. This land here, that's under that survey, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Those boundaries, that's not Waswauxing. But they call it now all Waswauxing because if they so much registered to be part of their reserve taken from the Nanbushes, then the government's going to be involved because their limit to the First Nation treaty native is to get that 50 acres or 40 acres, and if there's 50 acres to be added, it cannot be done by the law of Canada for the natives. Whatever the size of that Indian reserve was made, it cannot be other land added to that, eh?
Mm-hmm.
To make it larger. Eh?
Right.
So, no. I have studied those people, those leaders. Eh? I have studied them. It's not my duty or to complain anything what they're doing before the fact. Stay out of it. Let them do what they want. But in order to warn somebody, don't do that. Stay out of trouble. Eh?
Mm-hmm.
So now, there's a lot of criminal activities. You name it, it's all here on this island. And if the law should come in and all the facts are put on the table for each person to be charged for their criminal cases, how many people that you think would be left to be innocent? You see, all that hidden facts, nobody's being charged anything serious. Nobody goes to jail. There might be for drunk charge. They might go to court for a breach of trust. But that happened a few times.
Mm-hmm.
The leaders down there, they brought in their trustee, and they didn't trust him, and they fired them out of council to serve them. And that person went to the law to complain under the Indian Affairs law. they were charged for breach of trust. They were fined. They had to.
Yeah.
They had to pay that person who they mistreated and threw out of council or the band office. They had to pay them. So one girl, she was secretary for the council and that corporation, and they laid her off from her work. So in the guidelines of that corporation for their staff, they cannot be laid off like that without a reasonable reason. And her lawyer, he went to Toronto, sued the First Nation Council thousands and thousands of dollars for a loss of employment and all that support with monies that they needed. They had to be given twice as much. Yeah. That's what happened there. So, is it going to happen again? It almost did. Because, my friend there talking to those two girls, that they're out of work, they're supposed to be in the office at village there. And that goddamn chief, he said they set up a new law in the office, the regulation got us out of work. So we're going to have him thrown out of council. We're going to get him to step down, and if not, call the authorities to have them remove out of office. No more of him around, as well as along with his staff. Yeah.
Wow.
That's what happened there. So that's when Ed King over there talked with those girls. Ed, you're going to be, you should be running for chief and bringing new laws to support us to stay on the job. Whatever Ed told him, I said, why didn't you use the native laws that where you can't be replaced once you're found to be capable of being an employee in the office, you're doing your share of work. How can they possibly change the law and have you dismissed from your position? It's now a head scratcher.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing, Grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always nice walking down history lane with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your insight. I'd like to offer you some more tea. What do you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's good.
Mama P?
Mama P. But that's what happened over here. The closest story